Hello and welcome to another episode of Charles' Weekly Parti. I'm Charles, your host, and there's been some shocking events this past week that I can't wait to talk to you about. But before we get started, let's roll the intro. Alright, so I'd like to open up today talking a little bit about, how the podcast is going thus far. So it is now April. We just had April 1st around the corner, so there were plenty of tech jokes regarding April 1st. So I think HyperX announced grass-covered keycaps. Razer announced a bodysuit for the metaverse. And I think it was Dyson that announced a set of headphones with a air purifying apparatus. So, all fun little things, but those aren't the most shocking of the things that happened this past week. And that's actually down in the tech section, so that'll be an interesting thing to stick around for. Now, I do have to say I've been thinking about how the podcast has been going. So this is episode 10 of the year, and I announced previously that there was a goal to get to 40 episodes throughout the year. And I'm recognizing now that there are going to be some busy weeks up ahead. So I know I'm planning on taking Easter completely off. So when I say that I'm taking it off, it's complete off. I want to spend time with my family and friends, and I'm hoping that you all will get to do the same thing. So there will be no episode that week, and I'm hoping that I can get a chance to record a couple of episodes because after that I will have some traveling coming up, and I will note out that because of the way things are working out, I'm anticipating that there may be a couple of episodes that are pre-recorded about architecture. So I know personally I prefer recording them on a once per week basis, but I think it will be useful to have a couple of episodes there because I know what happened last year was there were a couple of weeks that I ended up being surprised with needing to take off, and I only have a limited number of those weeks per year. So because architecture is as timeless as it is, I think that the best solution to make sure that you all get the 40 episodes that you're expecting and that I'm able to take a couple of weeks off that I wouldn't have otherwise been able to, I think some pre-recorded architecture episodes are the way to go. And it balances out because there are a couple of weeks that I inevitably have something come up in the technology world that grabs my attention and gives me something to talk about. So, all that being considered, I'm looking forward to I'm looking forward to having this try and work out because for those of you who were listening last season, the last episode happened the last week of the year, and it was really, for me, it was a sort of painful episode to sort of produce because I felt rushed on the episode. I wanted to spend time with my family for the holidays, but instead needed to record an episode to meet my 40 episode goal. And I think 40 episodes is pretty reasonable, so I think we're going to have to roll with it and see how it goes. But enough talking about the plan for the roadmap for the podcast. Time to talk about the content that you've all signed up for. So today I'd like to talk about the House of Houses, which is designed by Yuso, and it is located in San Rafael, Costa Rica. So, what really makes this house sort of special is that it is 3 houses in one. So, the clients for this particular project are that there's a mother, a grandfather, and children all in the same house. And I think children are, I don't know exactly how old the children are, but I'm going to venture a guess that they are somewhere in the teenage years. But looking at it, there needed to be a house that could enable the mother, the grandfather, and the children to live separate but connected lives. And as someone who grew up with family, I get wanting the separation and togetherness at the exact same time, because sometimes you really don't necessarily want to spend time with everyone in the family. Sometimes you need a little bit of peace and quiet. But other than that, when you do want to spend time with them, you don't want to have to venture across the planet to do so. So how to come up with that middle balance is to have one structure that sort of contains 3 houses, 3 dwelling units that allow each person there to have their own living environment, and to have that living environment fit their personality. Because think about it. The grandfather, who it was mentioned, is quite active and sort of has a lot of things going on. Reasonably would like his own spot to dwell. But being in the age group of being a grandfather, he might need help every now and then with something. So I know most grandparents aren't as technology literate. So having that ability to go and just walk a few feet down and be able to say, "Hey kids, can you show me how this works?" And makes it that easy. Just want to quickly point out, when I say technology literate, I am not saying that as a bad thing. So I know I'm more on the tech literate side, but that is because I spend a considerable amount of time working with different aspects of it. So I'm not saying it as a bad thing. However, it is fairly common for younger people to be a little bit more knowledgeable with how certain aspects work. And within technology literate is a very broad sort of scope. So the basic piece of it is just how to use the device that's in front of you to do what you need to do. Then you have a broader aspect of being technology literate, of being able to, maybe you want to do something a little bit less orthodox or less expected of the average user. That might be something that you're a little bit more knowledgeable with. So, like I said, there's a whole range of technology literate, but basically I'm using it as a broad term to convey that some people do a little bit better with things than others. And full disclaimer, there are areas of the world both tech world and other subject areas entirely, that I am not very knowledgeable with. I have conversations with some friends who do a lot of work with history to look at how different historical aspects are affecting the way we work today. So looking at, I guess it comes down to personality. And I'm absolutely positive that there are sometimes the children are going to be running to the grandfather to ask for advice on whatever topics there may be. I know I've asked my grandparents for different bits of advice on subject areas that they might be more knowledgeable with. So for me, for just getting knowledge on respect or learning about how things used to be, and learning about how in some areas I we have modern pieces that make it easier to do things, but also knowing that even the modern stuff is running off of old principles. Getting that baseline foundation, I have asked grandparents numerous times about how certain pieces work, and to get different bits of different things on how we've evolved. And personally, I can say that my grandparents, being a little bit further on, have had a lot more chances to see how the world works and gain wisdom from it. I know I'm wiser today than I was a year ago, and I'm sure 1 year from now I'll be wiser than I was last year. But it's all a chain in how things go. But getting back on the plot points that I need to focus on, including the plot itself. So putting all of this programming, putting basically 3 houses within one, that are all part of one house, into one piece of land got really interesting on this because the land had 200 square meters worth of space, and the program itself needed 132 meters squared worth of space. That's where things can occasionally get interesting. Bonus points. The plot of land that they're building on is not the biggest and widest one either. 200 square meters, I'm having a hard time in my head translating that, but multiply it by 9, I think would be a rough estimate to get the amount of feet squared. As I am in the United States, I think mostly in feet or square feet for area, so thinking about this roughly 3 times. So the land plot itself is roughly 1,800 square feet. And needing to use most of that for a building gets a little bit interesting. How to fit everything in there. So for the 3 houses to fit into that one house and that one plot of land, each house is the houses are sort of staggered in a little bit of a V shape across a central axis, which programmatically represents the fact that there are indeed 3 separate areas, but each of those 3 separate areas is connected, and and they're not too far away from each other, which goes to show the familiar bonds, because you have there 3 generations of family members who have their sort of separations, but they are tied together because of family. And the best bond is a family bond. Having those three sort of connected but separate areas, and the roof, mind you, connects all of them as well. Having that sort of connection but separation represents perfectly what goes on in all of our lives, right? I call my parents rather often. I talk with my grandparents not as often as I'd like to do, but every time I do talk with them, it's an exciting time. I also want to note out that there are some times we all need our separations. So there are some things I like doing with my parents, and there are some things I like doing without my parents. And I'm sure my grandparents and parents feel the same way. So throughout familiar structure, it sort of prepares them, or prepares the children that are in the house for what life will be. Which is that, yes, you will all be connected. Yes, you'll all talk to each other. But there does need to be a degree of you do need to balance out the separation and the togetherness so that family is something that is enjoyed and not something that it becomes pressure or hassle. And I found that personally in my life as well. There are there are some times where you need to be sort of separate from family to really appreciate them. For most people, the path of relationship with your parents there is an interesting development. So while you're young, so basically through high school, you're generally speaking living with your parents, and I'm talking about a sort of traditional family structure here. You live with your parents, and through high school, and then after high school, you either go college or workforce. And usually when you do one of those two things, you end up not living with your parents. And that period of time is a time for your relationship with your parents to transition from you depending entirely on your parents for your day-to-day operations to instead learning to be more self-dependent or independent, and still being able to say, hey, I need help with this every now and then. And even when you get along in life, once you're past the sort of transitional period to going from being dependent on your parents for pretty much everything to being dependent on yourself for pretty much everything, there's still times you're going to want to reach out to your parents, especially as your parents become grandparents. Because I'm sure every parent needs a little bit of help trying to get themselves set up to make sure that they're not doing a disservice to their children. And a lot of times the children will reach out to parents and grandparents, if they're lucky enough to be around, to get that assistance. So this program arrangement reflects that perfectly. So the children can go to the mother for advice, or they can go to their grandfather for advice. And there are times when it's appropriate to ask one question and it isn't the other. So, all in all, I think taking all of these ideas and implementing them into this design is incredible. And personally, I think the ability to do that in architecture in this particular project, is an outstanding way of doing it. So the structure itself has a general materiality focus of being sustainable. So almost all of the materials are recyclable or biodegradable, and there's a heavy focus on wood and bamboo where possible. Also, the commercial components that are used in this project are sized to minimize waste. So basically, if you know that the wood from producing your walls is going to be a certain height, you try and make sure that your building height sort of works with that height to make sure that you don't have to chop too many pieces off, or the pieces that you do have to cut off at the end are usable. Other areas of the project that are sustainable include the water collection system, which allows rainwater to be collected to service toilets and the irrigation systems, because that's very ideal, so that you can use the rainwater that you get to do things that you don't need perfectly clean water to do. I mean, plants usually get irrigated by the rain, and for toilet water, I don't drink out of my toilet bowl, so I don't need drinking water in there. And if your dog drinks out of your toilet bowl, the rainwater isn't the worst thing to have in there. Although, I have a side tangent that I could go on, but I am not going to go down right now. And last but not least, I want to note out that there are covered patio areas in the building to allow passive heat gain mitigation, because Costa Rica isn't the coldest place on the earth. It's certainly not Antarctica. So you're going to want to have ways of making sure that the house doesn't get heated up as much, and the roof of the facility is definitely a lighter shade to it. I think it was either light gray or white. And what that does is it allows for maximum sun reflection. Even the walls have white, I believe, metal sheeting to them. And that allows for the most sunlight to be reflected off the house so that you're not getting that additional heat gain. And the awnings for everything are also designed in such a way that the lighting coming in does not interact with the walls as much, which would heat up the interior spaces and increase the need for cooling. And personally, this is something I really wish more homes could take advantage of, because the average cookie cutter house does not have much in the way of passive design strategies built in, because those are not as easy to deal with, because that's a very site and orientation specific thing. So if you take a house and you rotate it by 90 degrees, if you have passive strategies, you're going to need to change them because of that rotation. Even if you rotate it 15 degrees, you're going to need to change things. So having that passive strategy means that for the folks living in here, you don't have to worry about the additional need for cooling. So I know if I didn't have to run an air conditioner in the summer, I'd be much happier. Unfortunately, I don't live in a very well, I don't live in a house designed for passive design strategies. So it means that in the summertime, I get hit with the heat. So I try and be as passive as possible, but at a certain point, that isn't exactly the best way to keep cool. The particular area where I spend the summers is an area where humidity gets high, and generally speaking, in the middle of summer, the heat gets to be in the 80s for the daily low. And personally, I'm not a huge fan of the heat, but it is what it is. And I will note out, passive design does not take care of humidity. So for that, you do need some active systems if you are concerned about the humidity, which for me, having a quantity of books is a massive problem. So as much as I would like to keep talking about this particular house, I need to move along a little bit to talk about the latest in the tech world, and the thing that not only shocked me, but shocked many other people who had certain, what's the best word for it? Something that not only shocked me, but shocked everyone who valued their privacy and thought that their private information was indeed private with certain companies. For those of you who don't know, Apple, Meta, and Discord were all fooled by fake legal requests for customer data this past week, or at least it was revealed that happened this past week. So emails came from hacked domains, which made them look legitimate and seem to the tech giants that they were a legitimate company, were a legitimate request from a legitimate law enforcement agency. And so data was given in emergency requests. So what an emergency request is a request from a law enforcement agency for certain customer data where they believe there's an imminent threat or danger of harm to someone. And a couple of the companies have noted out that there are certain situations where getting this emergency information has quietly saved lives. And it should be noted that what makes the emergency requests different is that, unlike a formal request, they do not require a judge signature because they are being requested for a purpose where you don't have time to necessarily go and ask a judge. So some of the data that it was accidentally given to the hackers posing as law enforcement agencies includes IP addresses, phone numbers, and home addresses. So it should be noted out that there are valid reasons for needing an emergency request. However, it is a little bit difficult for technology companies in the sense that you have tens of thousands of different law enforcement agencies to work with, and you can't easily check to make sure each of them is the proper channel. Now, what I will note out is there is a way to do it, and Apple and other companies have said that they will usually, at their discretion, reach out to a law enforcement agency to verify that the request that they received is valid. However, my personal thoughts on this are that in this type of situation, if you're responding to the emergency requests as quickly as you are, you should verify it. It doesn't take that long to talk with the actual department issuing the request to get verification. So basically, if let's say any town, Apple receives a notification or request for an emergency request for customers' data from any town police department, what Apple should be doing in that case, or whichever other company for that matter, so whatever company receives the request, should find any town's law enforcement agency's actual phone number through an actual legitimate database to contact them and say, hey, we've received a request from so-and-so, can we speak with them? And is this a legitimate request? So, once you speak with whoever issued the request, then you can get a confirmation that the request is indeed valid, or if they say, we don't have someone here by that name, or the person says, I did not make that request, you know it's an invalid request. And it doesn't take that long to make that call. And obviously, if a department is making that emergency request and you're saying, hey, we're replying on this emergency, if it is indeed a problem, it's going to be handled fairly quickly. So I noted out that these were committed from hacked accounts, or hacked domains. So if you remember the Microsoft Exchange server vital flaw that I talked about in a previous episode, I think last season, not this season, compromised accounts, partially as a result of the breach, can be bought for $10 to $50 on the dark web with the attached cookies to make sure that it looks like someone is it's not a fraudulent access, to make it look like it was just another access from your standard web, or from the person's web browser. So that's another thing to note out, and another reason for actually verifying with people that a request is genuine, because we do live in a day and age where compromised accounts can be purchased or bought and sold online. So, Apple's website pointed out that the tech giant received 283 requests in the United States alone, and 1,162 requests throughout the globe between July and December of 2020. And according to this report, Apple complied with 93% of the aforementioned requests. Meta has pointed out that they've received 211,000 requests from January to June of 2021, and in 77% of requests gave at least some information to the requester. So all I can really say on this is this goes to show that I know there are a lot of requests, and for Meta that's a lot of phone calls, but it doesn't take that long to verify that you're not handing it to someone you aren't, because anytime you accidentally lose someone's data, you're causing problems for whoever's data just got out, and that is a problem. Because imagine someone's making an emergency request for a person who they're trying to harass or have some other malicious intent for, and they don't have the home address, so they have a way of fraudulently requesting that person's data with their home address. If they get that address, all of a sudden something that someone has been concealing has now become knowledge to someone who has a malicious intent. And home addresses can't be very easily switched for quite obvious reasons. So imagine you have the house of your dreams, and now all of a sudden you have people who are causing you problems because they know where you live. What do you do at that point? Do you try and address the problems? Do you handle it that way? Or do you end up having to, or do the problems become so bad that you end up having to move, which becomes a great inconvenience to you? And not only inconvenience, but expense. So noting all of that, it's really important that no matter what request comes in, I know emergency seconds matter, but like I said, if you make the phone call to someone and it's a legitimate request, they're going to treat it like an emergency and streamline it where it needs to be. So before I close for the day, I do want to point out that the NVIDIA 3090 Ti and Arc Mobile GPUs have been launched. And the Arc Mobile GPUs are from Intel, not NVIDIA, just to make sure that I'm 100% clear. So the 3090 Ti's are going to be going for $1,999, and they're doing a pre-order system to try and prevent scalping, which is greatly appreciated. And for me, having watched all of the GPU problems going on over the past year, I think it's an absolute incredible thing for this to be going this way, because you can pre-order limit things by various different forms. So by shipping address, by billing address, by billing payment methods, all of those things allow you to make sure that people are actually that each person is able to order one, but is only able to order one. So you're not going to have people who are buying 100 of them to jack up the price on and sell. And if you think about it, most people only have access to one billing address. And if you use any online form of payment, your billing address is going to be verified against your card. If your billing method and your payment address do not match up, it is going to be red flagged and it will not be validated. So if you limit it to one per billing address, which most people only have one of, you're going to have a good way of making sure that each person who buys a card or who pre-orders a card is actually only getting one. Because most people do have more than one payment method, but no matter what, even if you have multiple shipping addresses accessible to you, you only have one billing address. So on that happy note, thank you for listening today. In closing, I'd like to point out it has been an interesting sort of week. Definitely be responsible, and this is a reminder that if Apple and Meta and Discord can all get fooled by a fraudulent email, it's very easy for you to get fooled by one too. So please stay vigilant, pay attention, and if you ever have any doubt about information being requested, contact whoever's requesting the information. And when I say contact, I mean reach out to them through a form of communication that you have or you can find. So if it's your bank, don't use the phone number that they give you in the email. Use the phone number on the back of your payment card, or use the phone number, or go to a branch or someone and talk to a real person to make sure that what you're getting told is indeed legitimate. Also, if someone says they're from some other country, and that you've won $1,000 or you've won $1 million and you just need to pay $1,000 fee for it, don't do it. It's a scam. Then no matter what, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. And just do all the right things. I know it's easy to get fooled these days, and trust me, I've had a couple of calls too. Even if something does happen, you live, you learn. Just my hope is that it won't happen to anyone, and if it does happen, I hope that you know what's in front of you. So if you did enjoy this episode, please be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. You can go to anchor.fm/weeklyparti, where you can listen to all previous episodes of the podcast. You can interact with voice messages, and you can support the podcast, which helps out immensely. Also, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please be sure to leave a review. And if you want, you can see the action on YouTube. So that's it for today. Take care. Have a good week. Roll the outro.